All right, go ahead, get rolling again. Before we get started, just one thing I wanted to bring.
Hello.
Okay, here we go. Just one thing. Just we can see how important this type of information is, and as important as it is to us in our generation, it's really critically important to the people in the younger generation, because they're the ones that, the world is changing, and those of us with gray hair know how much has changed. But our young people are walking into a world where it's going to be more and more difficult to be a follower of Christ. And because of that, I want to tell you just about some opportunities for anybody, parents, grandparents, or anybody who has young people in their life that they care about. There are a couple of programs that I want to bring to your attention. And these are programs that reach out with this type of information to our young people and help to prepare them for the challenges they're going to face in the culture. One of them is a program called Summit Ministries. Tim has spoken at Summit. He can actually talk a little bit about it. But it's a 2-week program. They have a place in Georgia and a place in Colorado Springs. And it's basically a 2-week intensive course where people like Tim, like Sean McDowell, like Greg Kokel, like our next speaker here, Abdu Murray. These guys go out there and they spend 2 weeks with these young people. And they not only give talks like this, but they actually stay there for a while. They interact with them. They have a big front porch. They sit on the porch. They let the kids ask all the questions they want to ask. And they give the answers to try to help train these young people. Not tell them what to think, but teach them how to think biblically, how you can know that the Christian worldview is true, and then how you then can take that and apply it to the cultural situations they're going to find themselves facing. So that's one. A second is one very much like it. It's also in Georgia. It's called Impact 360. They have kind of an immersion program, which is about a 10-day program, but they also actually have, like both Summit and Impact 360, actually have kind of a gap year between high school and college, where you can spend a whole semester of doing this type of training and this type of thinking, and really help to develop the mind, learn philosophy, learn how to ask the big questions in life. How do we find those answers? And how do we present them in a way that's compelling? The third program I want to talk about is one called Student Leadership University, or SLU. It's a 4-year program, actually. It's a couple of weeks each summer. The first year is in Orlando, Florida. You learn kind of Christian leadership. Christian leadership principles. The second year is in Washington, D.C., where you learn, you meet with congressional representatives. You kind of get an insight into how the Christian worldview interacts with the political world. The third year is in Europe, and you visit Normandy, Paris, London, and Oxford. And it is an absolutely amazing experience. You learn from just incredibly gifted teachers. We were there, a man named John Lennox, who is a phenomenal, he's got multiple PhDs, but John Lennox was speaking to the kids. But it's outstanding. The fourth year is in Israel. And that can be, to walk the land where Jesus walked can be for many people a real life-changing experience when you actually see the places that these biblical stories take place. So Summit Ministries, Impact 360, Student Leadership University. If you want any more information, please grab me afterward.
Do I have a program too? STRU?
STRU.
Oh, reality conference? Oh, yeah, reality.
That's what reality conferences is.
Yeah, reality conference.
But anyway, the key is that there are more and more opportunities for young people. And I really think that as adults who have young people in our lives that we care about, that we really should do what we can do to get those young people to these kind of programs. And they're taught by people who love kids. And so they're not only educational, but they're a lot of fun. And in many cases, they make friends that can be lifelong friends. So just think about that. But again, if you're interested, please come talk to me. Normally, I've got information about those. We weren't able to find it this time. My bad. But anyway, so Tim, come on up.
All right, let's do this.
Speaking of young people, first of all, I want to thank you and the leadership of your leadership team and the commitment that you all have made to bring these conferences here year after year. Let's give these folks a hand for what they do. And then, Tim, thank you for coming. I've watched you on YouTube and learned from you. Cool. But you were talking about the importance of young people, and while you were doing that, these young people were out of the room. And I am so proud because I was pastor of their church for 27 years. And these are the young people, 2 rows of young people here from First Presbyterian Church of Harrisonburg on Court Square. Cool. And I had the privilege of baptizing a few of these kids. So congratulations. I feel like a proud grandfather.
Very cool.
And we are so glad you guys are here.
We
All
are.
right, Tim, you're on.
So I do you mentioned Reality Conference. This is a conference we started a number of years ago. There is one coming up. I just had to Google it to make sure the date's right. But in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, we have March 24th, 25th. You guys don't want to miss this conference. I'm talking to you guys. You guys don't want to miss this. Have you heard of it before? Reality? Okay. So just so you know, it is a student apologetics conference, although we don't turn old people away, okay? But we have sold out. What's that? This one's at a church where's this one? You guys are if you go into realityapologetics.com, you're going to get all the info. But we have a great lineup of speakers. This year's theme is deconstruction, which is like the issue right now. A lot of people are going online and kind of talking about their deconstruction stories, and that is usually entails leaving. Sometimes it's just like parts of evangelical Christianity, but oftentimes it's like I'm leaving Christianity altogether. And so I just finished writing a book on this topic with Elisa Childers, and this conference is the best we've ever done. And we've sold out. We were in Orange County. We had 2,500, 2,700 students there. The building only holds 2,000, and we had to put them in overflow, okay? We went to Seattle. We sold out in Seattle. We went to the biggest church in Minneapolis, Minnesota. 4,500 can fit in their sanctuary. And we got 3,900. So we didn't sell out there, but we got pretty close. And then we were just in Dallas last weekend, and the big church there they brought in extra chairs, 2,200, and then another 400 watched in another room in the church. Okay, it wasn't. It was that's a much bigger venue. We want to fill that one. This one is it was Cottonwood Creek, and they were a great host, and it was amazing to see 2,600 young people on fire for God, wanting to worship and serve the Lord, but also be equipped. And so the opening night, man, I could talk about this for an hour, but opening night, we call it the late night reality show. And myself and my colleague are like the hosts. We come out to a monologue, kind of fun and funny, but we interview guests and share their stories. We're talking about church hurt, suffering. We're talking about truth, this kind of material that we're going to get into, what deconstruction is, what is the best thing how do you respond to your doubts? And we're saying don't do deconstruction, do reformation. Reformation, align your view to Scripture. That's what we're trying to do. Yeah, rethink what you believe, but always using Scripture as a standard, whereas deconstruction doesn't require Scripture as a standard, and that's why we end up, I think, where we're at. So I'm just saying, if you're ever going to come to a reality conference, I don't think we can actually beat this year as far as how well it's put together. So that's 24th, 25th of this month. Okay, we're going to talk about the truth about truth, and I don't know if we'll end up getting slides up, but we got some guys working back there. Okay, we'll see what happens. Let me start with this story. One day I was working. It's a couple years ago, and my daughter Jocelyn, she was 7 years old at the time. She's 9 now. She came up to me, and she asked, "Dad, can you ask Siri a question for me?" Okay, now, I said, "Honey, your dad is an apologist. He answers questions for a living. So how about I try to answer your question and we leave Siri out of this? And she said, okay, are mermaids real? Are mermaids real? And I thought, okay, this is an easy one. Okay, honey, no. Sad to say, but mermaids are not real. And now I could tell, just giving that answer, she did not like the answer I gave. Okay, she was unsatisfied with my response. And she said, but Dad, you don't know everything. Oh. She's 7. She's not supposed to know that yet, right? You don't know everything. Can you ask Siri just to be sure? So reluctantly, I pull out my phone and I ask Siri, are mermaids real? And Siri responds, not that I know of. Okay, now I'm gonna try to I gotta get back to work, right? So I'm gonna leverage this. I'm gonna say, okay, see, I said Siri agrees with me, mermaids aren't real. And my daughter, who's very, very smart for her age, she said, no, Dad. Siri said she didn't know if mermaids are real. And then she says to me, can you ask Siri to ask Google if mermaids are real? Google will know. So what's the point of the story? The point is we all want to know what's true, right? And it starts when we're really young with questions like, are mermaids real? Or why is the sky blue? Or, these kinds of questions. And as we get older, the questions get much deeper. They're questions like, why am I here? Is there purpose and meaning to life? Does God exist? And if God exists, well, why is there suffering? Why is there evil in the world? What happens after I die? So some of these big worldview type questions, okay? We all want to know what's true. Now, I actually want to begin talking about this idea of truth by quoting one of my favorite Bible verses. You may recognize it or you may not. It says this, I am one of the ways, one of the truths, and one possible life. You can come to the Father through me or not. It's all good. Live and believe whatever you like. It's cool. Whatever you choose is okay with me as long as you're sincere. Now, some of you are thinking, what Bible translation is that from? Is that in the Message Bible? No, it's not in the Message Bible. No, that's not in the Bible. That is, but that's what a lot of people hear when you say or when you quote John 14:6, which actually is Jesus speaking, saying, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And so there's this, I alluded to this when we started, and I was talking about I'm a Christian because it's true. And when I say that, there's something that happens. When the words leave my mouth and then they start to get processed by the person hearing them, they immediately think, oh, it's true for you. But it's not true for me. They immediately change how I'm using the word truth. And that's kind of what I want to walk through with you. Or if they do understand what I'm talking about, then they have other words for me. They got some names they want to call me. Because saying things like, well, Jesus is the way, the only way, is really offensive to our culture. In fact, out of all the talks that I do, the talk that I have had the most people get up and walk out in the middle of is this one. Actually, it's not this one. It's the one where I talk about Jesus being the only way, which relates to some of this stuff. You say Jesus is the only way, and that sounds like, man, that is bigoted, or because they assume that you must hate these other groups, these other religions. It's narrow-minded, they'll say, because how could you possibly make such a claim? It's intolerant. It's certainly arrogant. I mean, that's what they think. So we're living at a time in human history where before I think you can argue that Christianity is true, you actually need to make the case that in the world, in the category of religion and morality, truth actually exists in the first place. And so that's what I want to do now. I want to show you that truth matters to the Christian view and show you that truth truly does exist. So when it comes to Christianity, truth matters, and here are some reasons why. I mean, it makes no sense to talk about the word of truth, which is how the Bible is described, God's word is described, the Spirit of God, right, or the Spirit of truth, and a God of truth, unless there is truth in the first place. And yet truth is under attack. People are asking if there's such a thing called truth, and they're adopting a view called relativism. Okay, now that's kind of maybe a big word. Maybe we don't use that word very often. But simply put, relativism is a denial of truth. It says there is no truth. Now, that should not be confused with the concept of relativity. Okay, so you have relativism as an ism, and then there's this thing in science called relativity. And this idea is, you know, you guys are all sitting here and you're not moving, right? Now, actually, you are moving. It just depends what kind of reference frame we're looking at. You're sitting here, you're not moving. But the earth is spinning. So in a different reference frame, you're actually moving at 1,000 miles per hour right now. And actually, the earth is not just spinning, but it's rotating around the sun, around 70,000 miles per hour. So it turns out, man, you're moving pretty quick. So that's not what I'm talking about. That is relativity, not relativism. Okay, relativism is something different. Relativism can be described as a belief that there is no objective truth. There is no objective truth. Another kind of definition is the doctrine that knowledge, truth, and morality exist in relation to culture, society, and historical context and are not absolute. And so, yeah, it just depends. That's true depending on where you were born or what context you're in or what point of history you're in, that kind of thing. It is like infected, and I'm going to show you this, how it's worked itself out in our culture. Now, the writing has kind of been on the wall for years. In fact, in 1987, over 3 decades ago, Alan Bloom, a philosopher, wrote a book called The Closing of the American Mind. And in that book, here's what he said about the influence of relativism. He said, "There is one thing a professor can be absolutely certain of. Almost every student entering the university believes or says he believes that truth is relative. Truth is relative." And then he says this, "The students, of course, cannot defend their opinion. It is something with which they have been indoctrinated." Okay? And the indoctrination comes from our movies. It comes from our music. It comes from all the commercials. I mean, do we watch commercials anymore? It comes from all over the place. Now it's social media. I just want to show you, because that's Alan Bloom in 1987. And how that has worked itself out, I want to show you this little clip. This clip, the point is not to talk about the transgender issue, okay? But I think this clip highlights something really important. What it does is it shows how relativism has actually kind of worked its way into all areas of life. Now, I'll get this here so you guys can hear it. And it's an interview at a university, and they're just asking questions. The first question is really like, what if I said I'm a woman, okay? But then I want you to notice where he takes the question and how they're responding. It's their responses that I'm trying to highlight here, okay? Notice their responses.
If I told you that I was Chinese, what would your response be?
I mean, I might be a little surprised, but I would say, good for you. Like, yeah, be who you are.
I would maybe think you had some Chinese ancestor.
I would ask you how you similarly came to that conclusion and why you came to that conclusion.
I would have a lot of questions, just because on the outside I would assume that you're a white man.
If I told you that I was 7 years old, what would your response be?
I wouldn't believe that immediately.
I probably wouldn't believe it, but I mean, it wouldn't really bother me that much to go out of my way and tell you, no, you're wrong. I'd just be like, oh, okay, he wants to say he's 7 years old.
If you feel 7 at heart, then then so be it. Yeah, good for you.
So if I wanted to enroll in a first grade class, do you think I should be allowed to?
Probably not, I guess. I mean, unless you haven't completed first grade up to this point and for some reason need to do that now.
If that's where you feel like mentally you should be, then I feel like there are communities that would accept you for that.
I would say so long as you're not hindering society and you're not causing harm to other people, I feel like that should be an okay thing.
If I told you I'm 6 feet 5 inches, what would you say?
That I would question.
Why?
Because you're not. No, I don't think you're 6'5".
If you truly believed you're 6'5", I don't think it's harmful. I think it's fine if you believe that. It doesn't matter to me if you think you're taller than you are.
So you'd be willing to tell me I'm wrong?
I wouldn't tell you you're wrong.
No, but I say that I don't think that you are.
I feel like that's not my place as like another human to say someone is wrong or to draw lines or boundaries.
No, I mean, I wouldn't just go like, oh, you're wrong, like that's wrong to believe in it. Because I mean, again, it doesn't really bother me what you want to think about your height or anything.
Okay, so you can watch the full video online if you were just to type in, you know, can a 5'9" white guy be a 6'5" Chinese woman? But here's what was really like what jumped out at me when I watched this video is they're not willing to say that he's wrong about his height, about his race, about any of that. And the question is, why not? Why won't they say he's wrong? And I'll tell you why. Because that has become like the sin that you cannot commit. In a culture that is influenced by relativism and swimming, really, they don't even realize it because they don't know the word necessarily, relativism, but it is the water that our young people are swimming in. And so they don't even realize it, and so you can't say anyone's wrong. Of course not, because there is no truth out there. So, okay, now we've actually seen this kind of play out. These aren't just hypotheticals. For example, Rachel Dolezal, she made the headlines because Rachel Dolezal was a chapter president of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. But Rachel Dolezal is not black. In fact, here's Rachel Dolezal as a kid. She could be like in the Barnett family household, along with my girls, you know, blonde hair, blue eyes, she'd fit right in. And yet, when she's asked about it, you can actually see the interviews, she identifies as black. She feels black, so she is black. Notice how you determine what's true on this view. That's relativism. That's relativism. Or we could give another example. Emil Rattlebrand. This guy, he made the news as well because he is 69 years old and he's a TV personality. He calls himself a positivity guru, okay? He's in great physical condition. In fact, he went to his doctor. His doctor said, you know, you have the body of a much younger man, the physical health of a much younger man. And so he thought, you know what, I am younger. In fact, I'm 49, not 69. And some of you guys are getting an idea here. Okay, no, don't do that. So he went and actually took this to the courts and said, I identify now as 49. And I'm not going to show you the interview, but it's amazing that, and actually as his rationale, he used some of the same arguments you would see for the transgender issue, okay? That was his argument. Now, he actually lost that case, but he wanted to change his birth certificate from March 11th, 1949 to March 11th, 1969. But the courts were like, well, who existed from the 1949 to 1969? Who was that being? You know, this was the response. In 2018, Golden Globe Awards were presented, and Oprah Winfrey got up. And she told the audience she said, speaking your truth is the most powerful tool we all have. Now, here's the thing. You can have, if she means your experience, go for it. Tell your story. Speak your experience. But the one thing that you do not have is your own truth, okay? There is the truth, not just your truth, okay? If something is true, well then it's true for everyone. Now here's a problem with relativism. Relativism is actually really easy to respond to. When someone says that there is no truth, objectively, there's no objective truth, the response is to ask a question. And the question is, what do you mean by, the question is that true? Is it true? Is it true that there is no truth? Think about how you would respond to that. Yes, it is true that there is no truth. Okay, so there is truth. If you said, no, it's not true, then why are you talking, right? Why are you saying that? It sounds like, this is called a self-defeating or self-refuting statement. It's like sitting on a branch and sawing it off as you're sitting on it, okay? Saying there's no truth is a truth claim that you certainly believe is true. That's why you're saying it. Now, maybe that was too quick for some of you. So let's go through maybe some other self-refuting claims so you get the idea. How about this one? If I said, I can't speak a word in English, you guys see that refutes itself, right? How about this one? How about the second one? My brother is an only child. Some of you guys are going to get that one later tonight, okay? There's a famous kind of Winnie the Pooh episode where he goes to, Piglet comes over. You know, Winnie the Pooh has all these friends, right? And they're all, if you think about it, kind of annoying, all right? And so Piglet comes, knocks on the door, and Winnie the Pooh doesn't want to play. So he says, nobody's home. Now you have to be home to say nobody's home, right? So poor Pooh refutes himself. I was at the grocery store, and there's a National Enquirer kind of tabloid magazine, and the headline is, Woman Gives Birth to Her Own Father. Does anyone, who's buying that magazine? You know what I'm saying? Who's buying that to figure out, you don't need to do an investigation. You read the headline and you realize that ain't right. Or like Justin Bieber's got a song, Never Say Never. You know, Justin Bieber refutes himself. So the whole idea of relativism is self-defeating. Okay, it's dead before it even starts. But I want to kind of do more of a deep dive into, well, what is this thing that we describe as truth? And so we're going to ask the question that actually that Pilate asked, 2,000 years ago. Are we doing? I see it back there. So we might be in business here. Sweet. So you guys won't have to squint anymore. You're going to be able to look up there. Pilate says, we'll just keep going as you're doing that. Jesus says that his kingdom is not of this world. And here's Pilate's response. He said, so you're a king. And Jesus said, you say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world. And here's why Jesus came into the world. To bear witness to the truth. To bear witness to the truth. He says, everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. And then Pilate says, what is truth? Now, I don't know, we don't get the tone here, right? But something tells me Pilate wasn't asking to stick around for an answer. It was more like, what is truth? Like, really? You're going to bear witness to the truth? Everyone's of the truth, listen to my voice. What is truth? Okay, let's look at that. And to kind of understand this idea of truth, what I want to do is kind of use an illustration. Because I think everyone uses what's called the correspondence theory of truth, whether they know the name of it or not, okay? And this is the idea of truth. Truth describes, when something describes reality the way it is, then that's called true. For example, I need 2 volunteers. I need you to look at me and guess what kind of car I drive, okay? You got to guess what, so you got to kind of know some cars. Oh yeah, no, sorry, not my, I already told you what I drive. How about my very first car? My very first car. My very first car. You think of Volkswagen? What color? Red Volkswagen, and do you know any makes? Like what kind of model? The Beetle? Oh, that's kind of a cool car. Okay, red, I'm too tall for that. Red Volkswagen Beetle. Okay, that's kind of cool. Okay, back. Power Wheels? That would have actually been funny, okay? Because, we didn't have one of those growing up. I always wanted one, okay? I always wanted one of those. I don't know if they were too expensive or what, but we never had Power Wheels. Those are kind of cool. Okay, so we got, okay, I need one more. Yeah. Ooh, old school BMW. See, I like you guys. You guys are very kind, okay? Because typically, I'm getting Prius, People are like, yeah, he drives a Prius for sure. Okay, so we got a BMW, green, okay, and then we got a red Volkswagen. Now, here's what we can say with certainty. They both can't be right. Right? They both can't be right. Because they're making contradictory claims. So the car is either red or it's green or it's neither. It's either a Volkswagen or a BMW or it's neither, right? It can't be a BMW and a Volkswagen. It doesn't work like that. And so that is, now here's the thing. How would you check to see who's correct? Yeah, you'd want to go look through some old pictures, ask my mother, ask my mom or my dad, look at some old pictures. If we could go back in time, you check the driveway. You check the driveway to see if the claim, the belief, matches up with the world, if it matches up with reality. And if you were to go back in time, well, you'd see this in the driveway. It's red. It's red. Okay, now you're shaking your head, and that tells me you know what truth is. Right? Because you all are thinking, that ain't true. That's not true. So you all do really know what truth is. There's my, oh, it's not up there anymore. There's my, here is, it was up there for a second or no? It was never. Okay. And that is actually, so not Hunter Green, but that's a Ford Escort right there. 5-speed. Didn't go very fast. Okay. The point is, though, you all understand the belief or the claim, it's true if it matches up with the world. And if it doesn't, then it's not true. Now, I want to use another illustration. This one I got from my boss, Greg Kokel. If I were to ask you, what is the best flavor of ice cream? What would you say? Best flavor of ice cream. Say that, cookie dough, mint chocolate chip, coconut? No, that's blasphemy. That's, what? Neapolitan? See, whenever, growing up, we always had Neapolitan, and it was like, it was like the 3 colors, right? And no one's ever touching strawberry. It's always like the strawberry is like a clean line over here, and then, yeah, in the back. Which one? What's that? That's a grape nut? Is that a local thing, or is that like, remember, I'm Canadian. The jaw is like on the ground right now. Can't believe it. Can't believe it. Well, I have news for you, okay? The best, you're all wrong. The best flavor of ice cream is Reese's Peanut Butter Cup ice cream. Who's with me? Who's with me? Okay, I got a couple converts. Got a couple. The rest of you, we're going to get you a Bible. We're going to pray for you, okay? Now, of course, you guys understand that when it comes to ice cream, there's a sense in which it's just personal preference. It's likes and dislikes. We just talked about this in the last session about subjective truth. The subject makes it true. So as soon as I say, I like this, there's nothing out there that corresponds with reality. I'm not actually even talking about the ice cream. I'm talking about me. I'm talking about my preferences. And so some people like chocolate, some people like strawberry, some people like vanilla, that kind of thing. So that would be the subjective side of it. okay? That's subjective truth. Here's the way I think truth, most of the time, what we mean is objective truth. So here's another question. What medication controls type 1 juvenile diabetes? Insulin. Now, I've noticed I'm not hearing anyone saying, like, Reese's peanut butter cup ice cream, okay? Because that wouldn't work. The answer is insulin. Now, what if you didn't like insulin? What if you wanted to use, donuts or bacon or McDonald's to control your type 1 juvenile diabetes? That is not going to work. In fact, getting this question wrong will have deadly consequences, right? You got to get this right. So this is a different kind of claim. This is not a subjective truth claim. This is an objective truth claim. An objective truth claim. The truth depends on the object, okay? Not on the subject. So you could not believe insulin works. You could not like insulin, all that stuff. That doesn't change the fact that insulin controls type 1 juvenile diabetes. Okay, now there's going to be a quiz. Did you guys know there's going to be a quiz? Okay, don't worry. You're all going to be fine. It's going to be a piece of cake. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a claim on the screen, and you are going to tell me if it's an ice cream claim or an insulin claim. You're going to tell me if it's a subjective claim, like ice cream, or an objective claim, like insulin. So you're just going to yell at me, ice cream or insulin. Okay, let's see how we do here. Now, I'm not asking you whether the claim's true or false. I just want to know what kind of claim it is. So, how about this one? Coke tastes better than Pepsi. Ice cream. Ice cream. Very good. There's some weird people that think Pepsi tastes better than Coke. Okay, so yeah. So you got ice cream. Very good. 1 for 1. How about this one? How about this one? Coke Zero has less calories than Coke. That is an insulin claim, right? That's an insulin claim. It's not about likes and dislikes. We can kind of do the math, so to speak. Okay, that's good. 2 for 2. How about this one? The Toronto Raptors won the NBA Finals in 2019. What do you think? Insulin? That is an insulin claim. They did. Woo woo. So that actually is a historical claim. And historical claims are insulin claims. They're not ice cream claims. They're insulin claims. That might become important when you're talking about a book like the Bible, and you're going back and looking at some historical details. Those aren't the kind of things that are just true for me but not for you. Those are the kind of things that either happened or they didn't. They're insulin claims. When we say Jesus rose from the dead, that's an insulin claim. Okay, how about this one? I have my daughter's school here. Innova Academy is the best Christian school. Yeah, you might think, well, I don't know about that school, but our school's better. This kind of thing. Or you could put your church in there or something. How about this one? Tim Barnett can bench press 200 pounds. Now, be nice. Be nice. Don't make me rip this jacket with my... Okay, so now, here's what we could do. This actually is an insulin claim, okay, but it is a false insulin claim. What do I mean? I mean, we could set up a bench press, get the 45s on there, whatever, and boom, you guys would have to help it off me, okay? I'd be dying under there. So this is the kind of claim that can be verified. It's an insulin kind of claim. My subjective feelings about it don't make a difference. I could believe with all my heart that I can bench press 200 pounds. But when we set up that thing, that belief does not make it true. All right? So how about this one? All right, now you know that. How about Earth is the center of the solar system? Ice cream or insulin? Hesitation to some of you. This is an insulin claim. Now, it's not true. It's not true. The sun is the center of the solar system. But again, just like the last one, This is a scientific kind of question. And scientific questions or scientific claims and statements are insulin statements. They're insulin claims. Okay, here we go. How about this one? Nice and loud. Ice cream or insulin? Abortion is wrong. All right, now this is where things get interesting. Always. I put up this claim, which you may be able to see at some point on the screens. Abortion is wrong. This is not a scientific claim, although science weighs in on the question. It's not a historical claim. It's not a mathematical claim. What kind of claim is that? It's a moral claim. And moral claims, moral beliefs are typically placed in the subjective category for a lot of people. And I want to tell you that that's not where it belongs. Morality is like insulin. Morality is like insulin. Now, you may disagree with me on abortion being wrong, okay? That's something we could talk about. We could debate that. But that's not my point. My point is to say what kind of claim it is, okay? And this is absolutely an insulin claim on my view, okay? But here's what happens whenever it comes to moral claims. So I was in teachers college many years ago before I became a teacher. And it was a secular university I was at and made lots of friends, but they didn't share my views. And I had put something about abortion being wrong on Facebook. And one of my friends responded in the comments and said, if you don't like abortion, don't have one. You see what happened there? I said abortion is wrong, and their response was, if you don't like it, then don't have one. You see what they did with my claim? They took my insulin claim and they turned it into an ice cream claim. Likes and dislikes, personal preference. My preferences don't matter when it comes to abortion. When it comes to moral claims, what matters is what's true. And so I said, are you against spousal abuse? Are you against slavery? And she said, of course I am. What kind of question is that? And I said, if you don't like slavery, don't own a slave. If you don't like spousal abuse, don't abuse your spouse. And of course, she said, but slavery and spousal abuse are really wrong. And my response is, exactly. So is abortion. So what we're talking about, this conversation, is an insulin kind of conversation. It's not an ice cream conversation. Ice cream conversations are a totally different kind of conversation because those are just likes and dislikes. And who am I to say your favorite ice cream is a bad flavor or something, because you like it. And I think in the same way that these claims are different, slavery is wrong is a different kind of claim than I don't like slavery. Those are different. Now, hopefully you don't like it and it's wrong. That should be our posture. But the same is true with the abortion issue. Now, here's what happens. If morality is like ice cream, just personal preferences, then you can't judge anything as morally wrong. Not really. You could only ever say that it's wrong for you. Just like vanilla ice cream is not your flavor. You prefer a different flavor. Okay? So what Adam Lanza did in the Sandy Hook massacre, or what Adolf Hitler did, or Osama bin Laden, or you just go down the list, you cannot say what they did was objectively evil or wrong. All you can say is you don't like it. Okay, well, they did like it. That's why they did it. So it's just your opinion or your preference against theirs. But if there is an objective morality, an insulin morality, then that changes everything, okay? That changes everything. And we're able to judge what people do as really wrong and really evil, okay? And so we kind of already talked about this, so I'll just skip those. It's kind of like this. If I asked you the question, how do you know a good bowler from a bad bowler? How could you tell the difference between a good bowler and a bad bowler? The score. That's right. So if I got a guy here and he has a score of 186, is he a good bowler or a bad bowler? And you may say, well, compared to me, he's a good bowler. But that's kind of like how we operate, right? It's always like, well, he's not as good as me, or maybe he's a little better than me, that kind of thing. So we have all these other bowlers who are, guy's got 97. Well, okay, so he's better than that guy. But one guy has 201, so he's not so good. See, what we do is we end up looking at the scores of other people. But that's not how you know if you're a good bowler or a bad bowler. The way you know if you're a good bowler or a bad bowler is by the standard. And the standard in bowling is 300, 10-pin bowling. That's how you know. And the way you know if you're being moral or not, if you're a good person or not, is to look at the absolute standard. Because we all compare ourselves with people, right? Are you a good person? Well, I never stole anything. And the guy who steals some stuff, he says, well, I only steal stuff off the internet. I don't really steal stuff like in a store. I'm not like going through Walmart grabbing stuff. And the guy who goes through Walmart stealing stuff, well, he says, I steal stuff, but I'm not actually hurting anybody. And the guy who hurts some people, he says, well, yeah, I hurt a couple people, but I've never killed anybody. And the guy who kills people, he says, well, I'm no Adolf Hitler. You know what I'm saying? Like, if that's how you're going to operate, just by judging by people worse than you, you're never going to properly understand morality. We look at the objective, perfect standard, and that is God's commands, God's perfect holiness. Of course, we all know morality. I referenced this earlier too, because in Romans 2, it's written on our hearts. We all know morality. It says this, for the Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do what the law requires. They are a law to themselves, even though they do not have the law. They don't have like the Old Testament Mosaic law, but they still have something that tells them right and wrong. It says right here, they show that the works of the law is written on their heart. Every time they judge someone for doing something, they prove that to be true. In fact, if you want to know someone's status, how they really feel about morality, just cut in front of them in line. That's how you know. They're not just going to say, oh, that's true for you, but not for me. No, they're going to say, there's an objective standard out there that says, if you show up last, you're at the back of the line. Thou shalt not cut in line. Because when you do, people immediately start to react a certain way, right? That's how it works. And I think that shows how we really feel. There's a philosopher named Frank Beckwith, and he was doing a radio interview with this lady who was actually a relativist. And she's going on about how that's true for you, but not for me, and morality is kind of like emotions and ice cream and this kind of thing. And as she's going on and making her case for relativism, he grabs her purse and starts pulling stuff out of it. And she's like, what are you doing? And he says, wait a sec, I'm taking your stuff. And she says, you can't do that. Wait, weren't you just saying a moment ago on the air that what's true for you is true for you, what's true for me is true for me, and who are you to judge, and you can't force your morality on people? Well, here's my morality. I take people's stuff. And so it proved the point. Even the person who is espousing, who is saying relativism is true, could not live it out. In fact, everything would turn to chaos if people truly lived out relativism. Okay, so moral claims are insolent claims. And if you're a Christian, you know that. And here's why. The claim, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, that's a moral claim. And you cannot go up to someone and say, That the bad news is you're a sinner and you have fallen short. And and then offer them the good news. You can't do that. That whole thing is out of bounds. It's offside for our culture. Why? Telling someone a sinner is a moral claim. And that is ice cream to them. So how dare you? How dare you? But if it's insulin, now we're talking about objective reality. And we're communicating truth to a world who desperately needs it. So moral claims are insulin claims. I like how C.S. Lewis puts it in Mere Christianity. He says this: it is after you realize that there is a moral law and a power, God, behind that law, that you have broken the law and put yourself wrong with that power, it is after this and not a moment sooner that Christianity begins to talk. You want to know why our message is less effective in our particular cultural context? It's because when we tell people they're sinners and need Jesus, they're offended. They don't believe that's actually true. They're thinking it's like you eat vanilla ice cream? You know you're going to go to hell for that, right? Wait, that's just my preference of ice cream. But that's how they're taking it. That's how it's being interpreted. Here's this preference, here's a thing I like, and you're saying is wrong, and not only wrong, but I'm going to be judged for this thing? That's what's going on in their minds. That's why it's like we're talking right past each other. So Christianity will begin to talk when people realize that they've broken a real moral law, a law that is true as insulin. Now, we've looked at the moral law. How about this one? We talked about this earlier. Jesus is the only way to God. That's not really a moral claim, although morality kind of plays a role in it. It's not really a historical claim, although we can talk about the historical Jesus and resurrection and all that stuff. But this is a religious claim. And I'll just tell you, religious claims are insulin claims. And so when my friends who are Muslim make a claim that Islam is true, I do not treat it like it's their favorite flavor of ice cream. No, they're making a claim about reality. And I'm making a claim about reality, and we both can't be true. Remember the two cars? Can't be a green BMW and a red Volkswagen. One of us is mistaken. What I love about talking with my Muslim friends, or even Jehovah's Witness friends, or my Jewish friends, is they recognize that. They understand truth, so we're able to talk. They think I'm wrong, and I think they're wrong. And we're able to talk. The culture today, though, is different. It's so influenced by relativism that to even say that they're wrong would be the sin that you cannot commit. And so it's not that Christianity is our favorite flavor of religious ice cream. It's that we're talking about truth here. And by the way, this is why all roads can't lead to God. All roads can't lead to God. I'll tell you why, because these roads make vastly different claims about reality. They are maps that point in different directions. They're not pointing in the same direction. It's like I'm reading my map and it's saying go north, and my Muslim friend is reading their map and it's saying go south. That's what we're talking about. What do I mean? When you consider just like the fundamental claim of Christianity, the resurrection, what do the other religions say about it? Well, if you go to our Jewish friends, they're going to say, yeah, Jesus died on a cross and he stayed dead. He was not the Son of God. He was not the Messiah. He died and stayed dead. You talk to our Muslim friends, here's what they'll tell you. Jesus didn't even die on a cross and therefore didn't rise from the dead. They believe maybe Judas was made to look like Jesus and they crucified him instead. God would never crucify a good prophet, and since they believe he was a good prophet, that never happened. Christianity says he died and rose again. They all can't be true. He either died or he didn't. He either rose or he didn't. Now, when people claim all religions are basically the same, it's my view that they don't know what they're talking about. And what they've bought into is some superficial similarities between religions, but they don't understand there's fundamental differences. It's kind of like this. If I have these two pills here, they both have an A on them, they're both blue, they're both circular, and you have a headache. Does it matter which one you take? Now, maybe before you ingest one of these, just flip them over, just to check. And you find out that one is aspirin and one is arsenic. Now, both of these will make your headache go away. But one of them makes you go away, okay? That's a problem. Now, but I want you to think about this illustration every time you hear someone say, well, all religions are basically the same. There are superficial similarities, okay? Like you might be able to find thou shalt not kill in a bunch of religions, okay? You might be able to find that, or murder, whatever. Thou shalt not steal, you may find that in a bunch of religions. But when it comes to fundamental claims that they're making about the nature of God, the problem of humanity, how that problem gets solved, where people will spend eternity, those big questions are fundamentally different. It's like the composition of these two pills, fundamentally different. And getting it wrong matters. So Christianity, we do make an exclusive claim, and I think it's I'll end with this. There is an inclusiveness to it and an exclusiveness to it. The exclusiveness is Jesus is the only way. Tomorrow in service, we're talking about the question of what happens, what about those who've never heard the gospel? That's tomorrow in Sunday morning service, okay? If you've ever wondered about that question, there's going to be a lot of Bible. We're going to actually go through about 5 chapters in Romans to answer the question. And then we'll look at the book of Acts for a bit. What about those who've never heard the gospel? Well, look, it's an exclusive message. There's one way. It's the way, not just a way. No one gets to the Father except through Jesus. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. So there's this message. Hey, you have to believe. I appreciate what Jesus says here. He says, enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction. All roads lead to God, right? Not according to Jesus. Jesus says there's 2 roads. There's a broad road and a narrow road. And the ones who are on the broad road, they're headed to destruction. It's a different destination. And then it says, but small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and few find it. And that road, if you read through the Gospels, is the path that Jesus leads us on. And so truth is a proposition. Truth is, a statement. Does it match up with reality? Absolutely. But truth isn't just a proposition. Truth is also in a person. And that's what we're trying to do. When we're talking about this kind of abstract concept of truth, we want to bring it down to we actually know the person who is truth. I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Okay, let's take a few questions talking about this concept. It could be about other stuff too, but if you have any questions related to the truth material, we could take that now, and then we'll go for a break. Does anyone have any questions? That is French for questions.
So if, and it is historically true
Yeah.
that Jesus rose from the dead.
Yeah.
He was seen. So doesn't that stay in the insulin?
Yeah,
question?
absolutely.
Okay. So even if someone, it's their opinion,
Yeah.
we still have truth.
That's right. So someone could say, well, I don't believe that Jesus rose from the dead. They could mean, well, that's just not my truth. So that therefore he didn't rise from the dead, So now they're moving into an ice cream kind of thing. What I would want to center the conversation, you say Jesus didn't rise from the dead, what does history say? Because history is about insulin. What do we have access to from the historical record. And we have access to Jesus being dead. We know that. I mean, even atheist New Testament scholars will say Jesus' death by Roman crucifixion is as sure as anything can historically be. What historical documents do we have? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those are treated as separate historical documents. We put them under one cover called the Bible, but a historian would say, hey, what does Matthew say? What does Mark? What does Luke? What does John say? We have Paul. We also, though, those are biblical sources. We also have non-biblical sources. There are more non-biblical sources that talk about Jesus than biblical sources, okay? So there's reference to it in Josephus, kind of indirectly. There's Tacitus, who gives kind of a real historical narrative there about what was going on. There's other figures from antiquity who are talking about this event. And then we could go on about the empty tomb. There's good reason to believe the tomb was empty. Okay, what happened to the body? Well, the disciples saw it. That doesn't make sense because these guys were willing to die for the claim that he rose from the dead. And liars make poor martyrs, right? People, I mean, I may die for something that I thought was true, but really wasn't. But these guys were eyewitnesses. They were right there. If they made it up, well, then there's no reason why they would, get beheaded or dragged to death behind a horse or stoned to death or crucified or whatever. I mean, this is what happened to all the disciples. They all died except for John through pretty excruciating death. So did they lie about it? No. Maybe they were tricked, somehow. Well, again, there's all these explanations that have been tried and found wanting. Okay, the best explanation is that the tomb was empty because Jesus rose from the dead. In fact, Paul, his life was completely turned upside down when he met the risen Lord. James went from a skeptic, Jesus' own brother, half-brother, went from a skeptic to, again, being willing to die for his faith, becoming a leader in the church and so on. And so anyways, there's a whole bunch of pieces there you put together. The best explanation, I think, is a resurrection that happened in real-time space history.
Hi,
Yes.
Tim. I want to frame, do you have a nice, quick, easy trick? Sometimes time is of the essence when you're dealing with a lot of the people that I talk to.
Sure.
Most of the reason for that is they don't want to hear the truth to begin with, and I'm savvy to that.
Yeah.
However, there are other people who, is there a trick that gets you past the ice cream mentality?
I think pointing out, like for example, when we're talking about morality, if you talk about something that is meaningful to the person, so something like maybe slavery or some kind of injustice, maybe it's an environmental thing, do you think this is really just a matter of personal opinion? Or do you think there is actually a right and wrong in this situation? That imagine, and this might be helpful for them too, imagine, we all get brainwashed into believing something else, like slavery is okay. Does that still make it okay? Because we all believe it is. Or is there some standard outside of any individual or culture that we're still beholden to? So let's say, some people talk about, what if the Nazis won and they somehow exterminated all the Jews on the planet? And we're reading the history books and we're all like, everyone's like, the Germans won. The Nazis won. Can we still stand out here and say, look, if that were to take place, that would still be wrong. Even if everyone believed it was okay, it would still be wrong. That points again to insulin, not ice cream, because ice cream is just whatever these people believe and whatever they feel and whatever they prefer. So I think that might be helpful. I think trying to get them to, I talked to a guy, I went to a public school, actually it was a Catholic school in Canada, which are publicly run. So they're just like the public school system. And this kid who was an atheist at the school, he came, I gave him a talk on the problem of evil, but he wasn't there. one of the Christians went and got him, brought him to me, and he basically said, yeah, there's no such thing as evil or good. It's all subjective. And I basically said, I don't think you believe that. And he said, well, I do. Okay, let's say someone breaks into your house and they hurt your mom or your sister and they kill your dad. Do you think that that's just true for them, or do you think they've done something morally wrong? I know you don't like it. I'm saying, do you think there's something beyond that? And it was like trying to get him, like, make it personal, change it, I think, a little bit. Because we were able to talk about slavery and this and that. And it's like, well, that doesn't affect him immediately. But what if it was your own family? Would that change things? And so I think for some people, though, when it comes to these kind of issues, I throw my hands up and you don't need a philosophical argument. You may need a psychologist, or a psychiatrist, because if you can't say that this is wrong, I don't know how to help you. It's like when I point to this podium and I say, there's a podium. And you say, there's no podium. I say, it's right here. There's the podium. And I can't fix your eyes if you can't see this. You know what I'm saying? And there's a sense in which there's eyes of our heart that see, and our conscience that see morality. And morality is almost like a furniture of our universe. And if you can't see it, I don't know how to make you see it. I don't know how to help you see it. I can point to it, say, there it is. Here's slavery. Here's, murder. Here's Holocaust. Here's whatever. Evil, wouldn't you agree? And if they say no, I'm not sure where else to go. Yeah.
It's heartening that there are so many youth here today.
Yeah.
But I'm concerned as a retired educator about the indoctrination at the collegiate level. Well, and somewhat in high school maybe too. I'm not sure about that. But I don't see the path to have that changed at the university level.
Sure.
And your video is a perfect example of that.
You're right.
And so we don't have all the kids here.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have associations or agencies that are making inroads on that?
Well, okay, so that's why we started, one of the reasons why we started our conference. So we will reach 15,000, over 6 conferences, 15,000 young people in 1 year. We're already starting with next year's conference planning. It's all about identity. So we are responding to kind of what's going on in the culture. And if you come to our conference, you're going to get a talk on truth, because this is fundamental stuff. And you need to understand the difference. So I understand that's just a small group of students. How do you combat against what's going on, the indoctrination you're describing? And here's the thing. The world is different than it was even 20 years ago, because it's not just a university, it's social media. We lose kids long before they've ever gone to university. The best study, there's a book called You Lost Me by David Kinnaman. He's the president of Barnett Research. He found, and it's probably the best research out there, 3 in 5 young people will disconnect or disengage from the church by the age of 15. 15. Why is that? It's because you don't need to go to university to hear other views. You just have to have one of these. And if I'm on TikTok, if I'm on Instagram, if I'm on YouTube, whatever, all these ideas are coming at me. Memes. We are. Yeah. I don't want anyone to be on it. Because there's so much depravity. I mean, if you've been on there, you'll see what I mean. But because that is the #1 app for a certain age group, I'm on there and producing content that is content that they may not hear me speak like this, but they're going to watch me, do a 3-minute video in front of my webcam at home. So it's a different way of teaching and training and responding. We're trying to equip parents so they're proactively getting their kids ready for the battle. See, our kids don't understand there's a battle coming. It's kind of like I show this picture of Muhammad Ali standing over Sonny Liston. Sonny Liston, it's an iconic photo. Sonny Liston took a right hook to the chin. He's on the mat staring up at Muhammad Ali. And what I do is I have this slide up there, and then a speech bubble comes up next to Sonny Liston, and it says, "Do you recommend any boxing resources?" Because that's not the best time to be asking for boxing resources. The training comes before the battle, if we can help it. And so the idea is, hey, we need to start training the minds of our students, engage their minds early, so when they're confronted by some of these challenges, they're able to respond. But that's only one piece of this puzzle. So there's the intellectual stuff, which is kind of the world I live in. But there's also the relational part. You know, the number one thing that keeps children in the faith in which they were raised, whether Christian, Muslim, Jewish, whatever, is relationship to dad and relationship to mom. And then next was relationship to grandparents. That was a Harvard study done on this. And again, so relationship plays a role just as much as the intellectual stuff does. And so for us, we want to be there for our kids, so when they do ask their questions, we're ready. But we also want to be equipping them. And then, of course, there's this other moral component. And there are students I've talked to, and they may raise an intellectual challenge, but at the end of the day, it's not intellectual for them. There's moral things going on. Like, hey, I got a girlfriend now, and we want to have sex. And I know God says, no, it should be within a covenant marriage relationship. So how do you get rid of the tension? God says this, I want this. Hey, get rid of God, no tension. I get to do what I want to do. I know that's not like, it may not be articulated like that, but I think in many cases, just knowing myself, knowing humans, that's how it works. Our will, and then there's God's will. And we often don't like it when God wills something that we don't like. And so what do we want? We want to change God. We want to make God in our image. God's okay with this now, because I'm okay with it. So you have the intellectual stuff, you got the relational stuff, you got the moral stuff. It's a lot. And that's why at the end of the day, we're also trusting God. We're praying, like we're on our knees praying for the next generation. That God will guard their hearts and minds, that he will keep them. And if they do drift away, God will bring them back. Maybe they come to the end of themselves, like the prodigal son, right? He left. See ya. And it wasn't until he was in the pig feed, where he realized, man, this isn't right. And he came back. So, which by the way, that 3 in 5 young people that disengage, many come back later in life. Yeah, I'm with you. It is like, it's hard. But we do see kids, you got to come to a reality event, and then it will change your mind. Or that will give you encouragement. Because if you only read the stats, if you only got the emails that I get, hey, my son, my daughter, can you go out for lunch with them? Can you email them? Can you do this? They're no longer walking with the Lord. And I'm thinking, maybe that will help, but I'm just a stranger. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if this is going to really help. And then you go to a conference like Reality, like last weekend, and I get to see 2,600 students just like ready to go into the world and make a difference for Jesus. That was, I think it was like Washington State.
Yes, Washington State. This guy's name is Joseph Backholm.
Yeah. He's got a lot of good content.
He really does.
You know how God created all the other universes?
Yeah.
Is there proof that he may be created other beings in the other universes?
Oh, very cool. So he created all these. So the one word I would maybe change is I would change the word universe for galaxies. So God made one universe that we know of. Now, that's another question. Could God have made other universes? So you think of like, if you watch Marvel movies, there's this multiverse thing happening now. And there's a lot of people in the scientific community who are using the multiverse, all these other universes, to explain why our universe is so finely tuned for life. Another day, we would have to have a talk on the awesome fine-tuning of this universe. If there's one, that looks like design. But maybe if there's like a whole bunch that somehow randomly came about, you'll eventually get one that looks like ours. So that's why they're appealing to this unobservable universes. But back to your question. If you have all these galaxies out there with hundreds of billions of stars, that means there's lots of planets out there. Is there any other planets with life? And I am actually not opposed to it. I don't think the Bible tells us there's other life like ours in the universe, doesn't mention it. But it's also really centered on the earth, right? And what's going on here. We certainly know of other intelligent beings like angels, right? So God has made other creatures that are intelligent, and they're out there. So that's kind of neat. So there would be nothing wrong with God if we discovered a planet with life on it, that would not be a shot against my faith. You wouldn't be like, oh no, Christianity's not true. No. The God who puts life on land can put it in the sea, and he can put it, and he can put it on other planets if he wants to. Why not? So that would be kind of cool if there was other life. I don't know if they'd be like us, but there might be life out there somewhere that God, just because he wants to, hey, I'm going to make life, right? And I don't think they're little green men flying in, saucers around our planet, but that's a whole other thing. Yeah.
Bring the mic to you.
We just can't win. It's I know, that's pretty cool. So I keep looking at that, and then I go to point here, and I'm like, oh, you guys aren't looking at anything. Yeah, that's right.
Hey, my name's Ricky.
Hey, Ricky.
I was actually Muslim for 20 years.
No
until
way.
Palm Sunday of last year, I became a Christian.
Awesome.
So I know the life, right? So say
that's
that,
awesome.
I guess my question to you would be, there are groups of Christians that believe that homosexuality and then living in their sin, they're going to go to heaven. I have relatives that are this.
Yeah.
And I don't care what religion you are, God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve.
Yeah.
So forgive me if I hurt anybody's feelings, but
Sure.
So with that being said, how do you reach someone that believes they're a Christian?
Yeah.
And they go to church, and their
Yeah.
church indulges in this, and they
Sure.
believe these delusions and these,
Yeah.
as you called it, truths.
Yeah.
So how would you go
Okay,
about that?
so what you're talking about is Christians who would hold to what's now going by the name as pro-gay theology or affirming theology. Now, I don't like that language because it makes it seem like that Christians who don't hold that can't be affirming in other ways. Here's my approach, and I got this from my friend and colleague Alan Schleman. He speaks more on sexuality and transgenderism than maybe anyone else kind of in the apologetics world right now. Every week he is somewhere speaking on this issue. And so he would be the guy to ask these questions. But here's what I think he would say. He would say, use a tactic that we call let Jesus take the heat. Let Jesus take the heat. You're talking with someone who claims to be a follower of Jesus. What you want to do is say, well, what did Jesus believe about this? And I know the claim is Jesus didn't say anything about sexuality or homosexuality. That's not true. He spoke about it indirectly in Matthew 19 when he spoke about marriage, right? And what was his recipe? Or what was his kind of here's what marriage looks like. It's one man with one woman becoming one flesh for one lifetime. One man with one woman becoming one flesh. In fact, what he says is, it's interesting. He quotes the Mosaic Law, which, by the way, he says, you guys got this law right here about divorce because of the hardness of your heart. The Mosaic Law isn't always the perfect law. So that's why when people bring up references to slavery or some other things, what you need to know is God is improving on what was going on in the ancient Near East, because the ancient Near East, if you read about what was really going on, you'd be like, wow, the Mosaic Law is like a huge jump up. But God is working with these people who are hard-hearted. Like they want to divorce their wife so they can go sleep with this lady, but they actually want this lady back. So they're going to come back and remarry this person again. So I'm going to divorce you just so I can go sleep with her, but then we're going to get back. And there was no protection for women in that setting. So what did Moses say? No, you can't do that. God comes in and says, no, we're not playing those games anymore. You want to get a divorce? That's not the way it's supposed to be, but here's how you're going to do it. You don't get to remarry that woman again. Forget about it. And what does he do? He goes back to Genesis. He doesn't go back to, here's what Leviticus says, or here's what, he goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 2, before the fall. It's a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, this kind of thing. Two shall become one flesh. So Jesus' view of marriage is something very particular. And by the way, Jesus' view of marriage is his view of sex. There is no sex outside of marriage. And so this is so when you get his view of marriage, you get his view of sex. And what I would want to do is when I'm talking to people who claim to be Christians but hold this other view, saying, where are you getting this view? Because I know you don't like this, but here's what Jesus teaches. Here's what Jesus says. So you're letting Jesus take the heat. Because they're going to want to call you names. But people like Jesus, generally speaking. They do. They like Jesus. And so you're going to step aside and say, here, why do I believe this? Because Jesus believes it. Not because I hate people, not because I'm intolerant or narrow-minded or any of the names you want to call me. I'm believing it because I follow this man, and that's what he taught. So that would be kind of a strategy that I think will be helpful. And then, of course, I think it's not just Jesus. There's New Testament theology. So I wouldn't quote Leviticus because that is under the Mosaic Law, and that was for a certain time and place. But what you see when you read those laws is there's some universal moral laws, and that's why they're in there. And that's why that universal moral law that transcends every culture shows up in the New Testament too. So under the new covenant that we're under, you have Romans 1, where Paul talks about homosexuality, and not just homosexuality, he talks about lesbianism. The only reference to lesbianism in the Bible is in Romans chapter 1, I think verse 20-something or other, okay? The man abandoned the natural function of the woman and engaged in the sexual. What's the natural function? Well, this is like plumbing, okay? This is like, you know what I'm talking about? So this is, without getting too graphic here. And the woman likewise exchanged the natural function of man and engaged in sex. So the Bible, I don't have a lot of time for Christians who try to, or so-called Christians, who say this is what the Bible teaches. It doesn't teach that. I have more respect for the atheist who says, no, your Bible really does condemn homosexual behavior. And that's what it teaches. But I don't agree with it, right? That's what the atheist, I appreciate that position more than some of these Christians that try to come in and say, let's reinterpret what the Bible says and has said for hundreds of years. And no one was mistaken on this before. No one was confused on this. And isn't it surprising that we are now, you got to see the irony here, that it's at the exact same time that the culture has totally embraced this sexual ethic, this new sexual ethic, that, hey, we just discovered that the Bible teaches that too. Come on. What's going on here? You have the culture driving an interpretation of the Bible that was never there before. And the reason you're just seeing it now is because of what the culture believes. There's so much to say. Alan Schleman has a ton of material. He's got a 5-hour course that I think you can get. I don't know if it's free or not, but it's maybe on our website.
It's on the website.
str.org. He writes virtually an article every week that I wish was a video that I could put on TikTok every week, because he's responding to the sexuality stuff is where the whole culture is living right now, and they have the most questions. So I could probably retire, just sit in my computer and read what Alan writes about this issue to my camera, and people would follow because there's so much good content there that Alan's putting out.
I have a question. You mentioned you have 3 daughters.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. I've got 4. So
Got
you have
me
one more to go.
Yeah.
But my question is, how do you expose without encouraging your daughters to be aware of the moral corruption in the world without then opening that door too far and putting too many toes in?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to
Does that
answer
make
this.
sense?
I'm figuring it out, man. As a parent, I don't have it figured out. So I'm like, there's been some stuff we did right, some stuff we did wrong. So we've talked about sex with our girls. Even my 7-year-old. I mean, they understand it, and it actually went pretty well, all things considered. Although there was we're at the dinner table, okay, and we got a book, and we got this thing, and we got, all this material that we're trying to present to our kids, because they're asking these questions. They're asking about where babies come from, and kind of avoiding it for the most part, because we don't want to get it, and then finally, okay, this is it, we're going here. And it was we explained how things work, and at one point, it was like kids were just running around our house, they were freaking. But we all settled down, and it's been really good. So introducing them to sex the way God has made it, that we're not ashamed of this thing, I think that's a problem that as a church we've just kind of, my parents never explained the birds and the bees to me. I figured out sex from my friends. You know what I'm saying? They just talking in the locker room and kind of, learning things that I wish my parents had been the people, or my church or someone, but I'm learning from my friends who are experimenting and stuff, and boyfriend, girlfriends, and it was not good, but sadly, that's how I learned about sex. We didn't want that. So there's that, and then of course, the knowing, okay, what are they watching? It's hard to watch almost anything now without some kind of sexuality thing going on. And so we've had to talk to them about, hey, there's going to be this thing in here. We don't want to completely isolate them. What I want to do, there's an appropriate amount of isolation, but there's also the approach that we take at Stand to Reason is not isolate, but inoculate. And the idea is we don't just shield you from all the ideas that are ever out there. Because what ends up happening is the kid who never learned about evolution because he went to a Christian school and they didn't teach it, and he went to church and they didn't teach it, whatever, and then they go off to university and their first-year biology teacher says, here's all the evidence for evolution. And that student's like, wow, that Christianity stuff's nonsense. That's how it happens. And it's wild because it's like, well, if they weren't telling me about this, I wonder what else they didn't tell me about. And so they didn't have the appropriate responses because they never really engaged with the idea. And what I would do is, this is what we do with our kids, we've talked about homosexuality. We've talked about transgenderism. And so when a commercial comes up on the TV screen, virtually, you cannot watch TV anymore without a commercial having a guy who is now dressed as a woman on the screen. It just doesn't exist. And it doesn't matter what you're watching. It's like, there it is. And the girls are just like, and so now they know what that is. This is either a drag thing or it's a transgender thing or whatever, and they're familiar with it. And I think that's, so there's an appropriate, have we gone too far? I don't know. Not for my 11-year-old. My 7-year-old, she's kind of all over the place in her mind anyways, right? So she's kind of heard things, but probably needs to be told them over and over and over again. But we're not having them sit down, okay, you're going to watch these 2 girls kiss, or you're going to watch these 2 guys kiss, or something. That's not it. But when we're out, we may see, we're in California, we're on the beach, and there's 2 guys walking along the thing holding hands. And my kids are like, what's going on there? Okay, let me explain. And we talk it out, So we're not afraid The fear thing is not the way to go. We're not hating these people. We're not like they're the enemy or something. That's not it either. In fact, I've had my kids, I got if you watch Red Pen Logic, it's usually my face and someone else's face. And my daughter the other day came up and she's like, I'm editing a video, and she's like, so who's the bad guy? And I'm like, whoa, because in their terms, right, good guys, bad guys. Like that's simple kind of in their mind. That's how they've kind of, no, you don't, okay, no, we had to go through the explanation. I'm watching a debate and same idea. And it was two Christians. I was watching a debate on YouTube, two Christians. And it was like, so who's the atheist? And actually, and there was an opportunity here, here's two Christians who both agree on fundamentals but disagree on this issue right here, And so that was a cool kind of lesson for her as well. So I don't have it all figured out, but try not to just isolate. I think the church has done that, and it's been to kind of our detriment in a lot of ways. So I think an appropriate kind of inoculation mindset mentality is the way to go.
Any other questions? Something I just wanted to say in response to some of the things that have been said. There's if God has indeed created the world to work in a certain way, if we are created to function in a certain way, then those who function according to the way God designed it are going to thrive. And those who try to do their own thing, so to speak, those who try to do it in a way that God didn't design it, just like if you buy a piece of equipment, you use it according to manufacturer's recommendations, it works fine. You do the proper maintenance and everything else. Yeah. But if you try to do it in a totally different way than it was designed to function, it's not going to work. Yeah. And there's a guy named John Stonestreet, and he has a saying. He says, ideas have consequences, and bad ideas have victims. And unfortunately, we live in a world today where there are a lot of bad ideas out there. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of victims. And one of the things I think that we as the church need to be ready for is to care for the victims.
Yeah.
Is to reach out to the people who are hurting, people who are going to get hurt because they're following these ideas that the culture is trying to tell us how we should be living. And like I said, there's going to be victims. And every one of us has, it's easy to get frustrated. It's easy to get worried. It's easy to despair. Mm-hmm. But we should always remember despair is a sin. That God is still in control. This is the same God who was, when things looked bad at the Red Sea, the God who parted the Red Sea is still a God who's alive today and active today. And every one of us has a sphere of influence. Every person in this room has people that we can influence. Yeah. And although I may not have much of a sphere of influence, look around this room. If everybody here influences your family, your friends, your community, we can make a difference. If all those 2,600 kids that are at the reality conference goes out and influences people. So remember, God's still in charge. And we can take credit for that. I mean, there's this great homeschooling movement going on. I mean, more people homeschooling now than ever before. Maybe that was one of the good things that happened from COVID, was a lot of people were homeschooling. A lot of people were seeing what's happening in the public schools and going, you know what, that's not for my kids. So there are good things that are happening, and I think we need to focus on that. But remember, we know who wins in the end. So, just a thought.
Yeah, it's good.
All right, let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll get one more question.
One of the things you touched on, Tim, is a standard.
Yeah.
We have a standard as believers.
Yeah.
What apologetic would you give us who are in leadership to encourage regular churchgoers, good people, have confessed Christ as Savior, but do not get into the Word of God on a regular basis so that they have the truth within them.
Yeah.
I mean, we're a remnant here today.
Sure.
But, you know, but this is the cry of many pastors.
Yeah, what I would say, it's a hard one, because you're talking about, there's a couple different things going on there. You're talking about apathy in the church a little bit, and I actually think this is a bigger problem than atheism, is apatheism. So atheism says there's no God, and apatheism says, I don't care if there's a God, you know, or I don't care about God enough to get to know him, because that's how you get to know him. When I read my Bible, what I feel like I'm doing, and maybe this is what we can encourage others with, it's like when I met my wife. We started to get to know each other, and I fell in love with her, and I wanted to know everything about her, you know? What's that? Yeah, that's right. That's right. And if you said to me, Tim, tell me about your wife, and I said, well, she has hair and teeth, and you know, and you're like, Tim, come on, tell me about your wife, like, and that's all I could do, you would see that I don't have a real relationship with my wife. The way you know I have a relationship with her is, man, I love to get to know her and talk about her and study her, and you know, every husband should have a PhD in their wife, you know, that kind of thing. You know everything about him. How do you know about God? Well, primarily through his word. And so many times in Scripture, it's like they forgot who God is. And the reason is, and you just look a few verses later and it says, because they forgot the law of God. They forgot his commandments. You know, we meditate on his law day and night, not just because we want to keep a bunch of rules, but because we want to know to get to know the God who gave those commands, because he loves us. We're designed with a purpose and a function, and he wants to see us flourish. And so here, follow these guidelines. See, the lie in the garden was, hey, the tree looked good. The tree it was desired fruit. But God said, don't touch, don't eat. And sure enough, they're like, oh, well, maybe there's something here I'm missing. I got to chase after that. So I would encourage, you know, as a leader with a congregation, is to maybe remind your congregation, the people who follow you, that God's word isn't this stale document or just like, here, there's another fact, let's write that one down. Here's another fact. No, the word of God is communicating about who God is, the person, his identity. And so every time we're getting in there, it's like, and there's a Bible app called Bible Hub. And is that the one where, oh, maybe it's not Bible. I mean, there is Bible Hub. The one that has a God shot at the end. Do you guys know what I'm talking about with Tara Lee Cobble? Does anyone in the room know what I'm talking about? Oh, you need to be following this podcast. You read the Bible recap. It's, by the way, it went from like no one following it. I was with one of the people who worked for the Bible recap this last weekend, and like there's been 200 million downloads of this podcast in the last like few months. What she does though is she recaps what you just read, kind of here's some things to think about, and then she ends with, what's your God shot? Here's my God shot. And what she means is, what did you learn about God in your reading? And you can learn about God. What's beautiful about it, you can learn whether you're reading Job or you're reading Leviticus or you're reading John or wherever, there's a God shot in there. Every time you open your word, and I think what happens is people read, I read these two verses, what does this mean to me? How does this apply to me? What is it telling you about the creator of the universe? Because that's who you're in relationship with. So that might be, yeah, thanks for that. Bible Recap, that's check it out. It's a really great app. Every day gives you some, content to think about God.
There's another YouTube site, the Bible Project.
Yeah.
And Bible Project is outstanding. If anybody's not been on there, it breaks down every single book of the Bible into about 8 to 12 minute, well done, graphic descriptions of each book, so people can understand what the book's about. And they have a whole bunch on different subjects, like faith and sin, sanctification. They're just outstanding, really well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bible Project.
So Bible Project is awesome. In fact, the Bible app has connected with it Bible Project videos and Bible Recap. So you can actually set, I think it's called the Bible app, or the Bible app. And it has all these other features built into it. So you can have your Bible reading plan in 1 year or whatever it is for you. You can listen to your Bible Recap. You can watch those videos. They start every book with one of those videos. But I guess the take home is we want people to fall in love with God again. And the way you do that is falling in love with His Word. Man, I've been reading through Exodus, and I don't get it. When people read and it's like, because I am learning something new every time. Now, maybe you need to bring a scholar or someone into your study, you know? So who are some scholars that might help you to illuminate something that you've never seen before? Maybe the Bible Recap will do that for you. There's a guy who actually just passed away. He's a scholar named Michael Heiser, Heiser. Michael Heiser is an Old Testament scholar. So when I go to the Old Testament, I want Michael Heiser sitting next to me. You know what I'm saying? Now, I don't agree with everything he says, but he at least gets me thinking. And there are times where I'm like, I've read that verse, I've read that chapter so many times and never saw that. Amazing. And it just like gets me excited. And it would be really cool if people were just excited and hungry to dive back into our standard and, man, just want to align our lives to this book.
And as we read God's Word and we fall in love with His Word and we fall in love with Him, maybe we can pray that we follow God's people.
That's right.
So when we're dealing with the LGBT plus community, or we're dealing with pornography, or we're dealing with ourselves, that we can see everyone.
That's right.
His eyes.
Yeah. That is a good word. We definitely need Christians to love and model how to love each other. Man, it would be really cool if we could model that better as a church, and the watching world would see how we love each other. By the way, Francis Schaeffer called that our final apologetic. They may not read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but they're going to read Tim and how Tim interacts with Greg and how Tim interacts with other people. That is an apologetic in itself. So we ought to do that. That's a good way to leave off on this for this break.
All right, let's take a break and reconvene at 3:30 for our last session.
Let's do it.